So now the awkward silence.
Michael, it looks like you've already got a shout out in the chat box, the Q&A.
Well, I saw that someone in the chat box was asking if we would go ahead and make some noise to see if the speakers are working. So let me be the one to start off that way. My name is Matt Thomas, and I'm Vice President for External Relations at Brenau. So we're very happy to have you all here. You know, traditionally I would have a glass of wine and have a fork and clang it to get everyone's attention, but you're just going to have my movements and my voice suffice for tonight. But we're just so excited to have you all part of tonight's virtual event. While we wish that we could have you here on campus, we know that the benefit of this type of event is that we can have people from all over the country and even the world. So we appreciate everyone who is participatory tonight. We're excited because two of the people that have really come to Brenau's sphere in the last few years and really have a transformative impact on what we do here with our art are Michael Stubblefield. So we are just so glad that you are able to be participatory in an event that has Graham watching from New York City and Michael speaking very close to that from afar, but through this forum. So we're just happy to have you. And without further ado, because we have such a packed evening, I'm going to just ask President Dr. Ann Sclater to now provide an official welcome for the evening. But thank you all for being here.
Good evening. I don't know that I could do a better job than Matt did unless I did have that drink in my hand. But I would like to say good evening. Thank you so much, Matt, for starting us off. And I want to just quickly thank a number of people who made tonight happen. And starting with Nicole Ferguson, Dee Dee Castle, Allison Lauricella, Jody Wall, and Emily Thomas, and there's probably more. But this is a very exciting night. I'm going to be brief exactly for the reason Matt mentioned, because we've got lots to talk about and lots to learn from Dr. Stubblefield. But it is an important evening in the art world and in the life of Brenau. I welcome Dr. Stubblefield, Michael, and his wife, and I call partners in all things birds, Dr. Ellen Stubblefield. I wish as well as Matt, that I could welcome you in person, but we'll have a chance in the fall when we have your exhibition. I want to thank Dr. Stubblefield for his generosity in supporting the Arader collection, which is a very distinctive coming together of the sciences and the arts, the perfect reflection of our university. Brenau has been combining the science and the arts for 143 years. And as our Ivester College of Health Science grows and the art donations in that area also grow, so does our commitment to the fine, performing, and creative arts. And magic happens in the intersection. Before I'd end, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, which I think is somewhere in the 120 range, for attending. I would also like to thank our many members of the Board of Trustees of Brenau, our faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends. And I especially welcome anyone who's never been to a Brenau event. Thank you for being here. Consider this another home. And whether you're visiting virtually or in person, our door is open to you. Thank you for the opportunity to say good evening, and I turn it over to Dee Dee Castle.
Good evening. My name is Dee Dee Castle, and I'm an instructor in the Department of Math and Science at Brenau University. I also currently have the honor of serving as the Arader Curriculum Faculty Coordinator, where I assist faculty members with integrating the Arader art pieces into their courses. The Arader Arts and Sciences Collaborative began in late 2018 as a way to enhance the bridge between artistic creativity and scientific exploration by providing students with access to a variety of natural history prints. A multitude of students have already been exposed to this program over the last 2 years, with more each semester. As Dr. Stubblefield may detail, naturalist artwork created the foundation for the process of scientific observation and allowed new discoveries to be shared with people all over the world with precise detail and descriptions. Here at Brenau University, we are excited to share the history and impact of these pieces with our students. For us, this program is not about creating another task for our students to complete mindlessly, but rather it's about providing our students with a meaningful connection between scientific study and artistic excellence. We have sought to integrate these works into courses where the themes can be readily tied together across disciplines. For example, Professor Claudia Wilburn has used them in her studio art courses to show students how the line work of the prints creates depth and shows direction. Students then use these prints as inspiration for creating their own drawings of plants and other natural subjects. Professor Kim Boyd has included the artwork in her course for science writing, where students study plants and form detailed descriptions based on their observations, which is exactly what scientific explorers did to produce these works and their descriptions initially. Dr. Shelton Ballou has integrated works related to Pierre-Joseph Redoute, and specifically Redoute's roses, into his French courses to provide a connection with French culture. While these are just a few examples, the curricular integration will consistently grow as we continue to build the program in the coming years. Other areas where we've identified potential curriculum include art history, English composition, ethics, business, honor seminars, and special topics courses in various disciplines, including biology and chemistry. Ultimately, we seek to give our faculty the creative freedom to use the artwork in a way that will be most meaningful for their own students. As we gain momentum, our priority for this program is to engage our students and the surrounding community in order to educate with expertise, passion, and excellence. I hope you'll all join us in this pursuit, and we'll continue to support our efforts as time goes on. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Ferguson, the gallery director here at Brenau University. And I'm not sure how I earned the honor tonight, but I have the privilege of introducing our speaker for the evening, Dr. Michael Stubblefield. Dr. Stubblefield is an accomplished professional nature photographer, writer, art collector, and birder. His natural history images and articles have appeared in hundreds of publications across the globe, and he has won several awards for both his photography and his writing. He and his wife, Ellen, have traveled all over the world, exploring and photographing the wonders of nature. Their collection of images numbers well over 100,000 and includes hundreds of species of birds, mammals, fish, and other creatures, as well as some of the world's most diverse and beautiful landscapes. Now, in his spare time, Dr. Michael Stubblefield is the National Medical Director for the ReVital Cancer Rehabilitation Program and the architect of comprehensive cancer rehabilitation programs across Select Medical's national network of inpatient rehabilitation hospitals and outpatient therapy centers. In addition, Dr. Stubblefield serves as Director of Cancer Rehabilitation at Select Medical's Kessler Institute for Rehabilitation in West Orange, New Jersey. He is triple board certified in the fields of physical medicine and rehabilitation, internal medicine, and electrodiagnostic medicine. Dr. Stubblefield has authored numerous scientific articles and book chapters on cancer rehabilitation and is the author of Cancer Rehabilitation Principles and Practice, the only comprehensive textbook on the subject. He is an international leader in this field and has been repeatedly named one of America's top doctors for cancer, and New York metro area's top doctors by Castle Connolly. I had the great joy, along with Dee Dee Cassell, of spending some time with the Stubblefields when I visited New York several years ago on Arader Art Initiative business. And I have to add to all of the professional accolades that I've mentioned, and there are many, that Dr. Michael Stubblefield and his wife, Ellen, are two of the most kind, generous, and hospitable people that you could ever hope to meet. And anybody on this webinar that knows them knows that that is the truth. So it is my great honor and privilege to welcome Dr. Stubblefield to the screen tonight to begin our wonderful evening.
You know, I'm blushing so much that the color balance is changing on the video here. That was a very sweet introduction, Nicole. Thank you very much. Let me see if we can share screen here, because all of these accolades have cut into our art. You've disabled screen share, so I need that back from somebody. Okay, we'll try now. Awesome. Okay. So now I don't think you guys are going to be able to see everybody, or yeah, but that's okay. And I crack a lot of bad jokes when I give presentations like this, so I apologize in advance. I really am just delighted to be here. I know there's a lot of friends and family hiding out there in internet land, and I wish I could see all of you. And you know, our heart goes out to all of you who are one, getting ready for this election, and two, suffering through COVID. Ordinarily, when I give talks like this, I have to do disclosures, like I do a lot of grand rounds. And my disclosures for this are, I am not a historian. I'm not an art historian. I'm a doctor. I'm reasonably good at that. I'm a photographer. I'd like to think I'm good at that, but others may disagree. And I'm an obsessive art collector, and that is really my only qualifications for being here tonight. That being said, I'm really grateful. I spent a lot of time trying to put this together. And the truth is, I learn a lot both by collecting art and trying to understand and reading about it, and doing things like this presentation and trying to share my love of this and why I get totally nerded out on both photography and birds and art collecting. You know, the fact that a couple of people are willing to show up and hear me out and spend an hour with me is really just wonderful. So a few acknowledgements. One, Graham, I know he's out there looking at this. Graham Arader really started my career in natural history art collecting. He may not know this, back at the end of 2013 when I bought my first Audubons at an auction, and I had no idea you could actually own these things. It's like owning a piece of history to me, and it really connects you to your past. And that has been a tremendous relationship for me personally. And I'd like to think also for Brenau, who's also benefiting from his tremendous generosity and his eagerness to further education. Then, of course, Jane Eckert, who you may not know, but Jane Eckert had a connection with Brenau, and she owns Eckert Fine Art. She's just a wonderful, amazing person. And Eric Forsman, who is really one of her few living artists, who's just a magnificent, as he says, eyeball realist. We actually bought this painting as it was being created here. Their connection is what sort of brought us to Brenau a few years ago and started this wonderful relationship. And of course, Anne, I've just never met a more wonderful and gracious, smart woman as her. And for those of you who are actually, you know, living the Brenau dream, you just could not have a better leader. I just absolutely adore her. And then of course, Nicole, who I did not have a photo of, but I thought this badass unicorn really kind of, and I know she's laughing her head off and probably blushing out there, but when we did a Zoom the other night, she let me know that she was very into unicorns, which I think is great. I like creatures of yore, as you can imagine. And then you'll see a lot of our pieces framed. So Theresa Basile is our art framer. She is just magnificent. We have a little bit of different taste from just the gold gilt frames, as you probably can see behind me and you'll see going through here. And then of course, none of this would be possible without my wife. She tolerates me. She will go places with me. She can carry heavy things even though she's very small. And you know, just the mere fact that I'm able to have the liberty to collect art and take pictures and have a wonderful relationship aside just means the world. All right. So with that said, let's start looking at some art. And I want you all to take yourselves back. Take yourself back, 500 years or so, right, to what we would call the modern era. Before this time, our interest in birds largely, it'd show up in some religious art and on some cave paintings and stuff like that. But really, our interest in animals is what can you use them for, right? Are they good to eat? Or are they too bony? Are they this? Or are they that? We really weren't trying to classify them above just how they would meet our basic needs. I mean, there's certainly going to be exceptions. This is where I'm not a historian. But certainly you go back much further than this. Birds were looked at more as food than anything else. It was really after this time that you start seeing an interest as we start exploring the world. And we have more of a modern middle class emerging in some of these port cities throughout Europe, that we really start seeing these things as something, again, that could be potentially exploited, but also something that are interesting in their own right. The earliest paintings I have are for Christoph Ludwig Agricola. He died in 1799, 3 years ago. So these paintings are, at least 300 years old. And to me, every time I look at them, I'm seeing the hand of somebody who died, so long ago, but was one of the first to start classifying. Now, Graham, Arader, who we mentioned, actually has a magnificent collection of Peter Holstein. These were from the 17th century, much earlier than this. And these were really the first known folio of birds from around the world, but I don't have quite those resources. So here we are. On the left, we have a siskin, a Eurasian siskin. Believe it or not, there's been a huge invasion of pine siskins. I think I counted 125 in Liberty State Park, which are very unusual here. And on the right, a common kingfisher. So there they are. These are my photos, what these birds look like in real life. So I think he did an absolutely beautiful job of rendering them. I'll just go back so you can see. There you go. All right, then we come to the age of Mark Catesby, 1683 to 1749. Now he was English, but he spent some time in the Americas, and his big sort of claim to fame was the natural history of the Carolinas, Floridas, and the Bahama Islands. Now, I keep going back to Graham. He actually has an amazing collection now of the first folio of this and some original watercolors from Catesby and some of his contemporaries that have not been up for a long time. These are, getting rarer and harder to find in good condition. This is the only one I own. I certainly hope to own more over time. This is a very common bird. This is a red-winged blackbird. But if you can imagine back in the 1700s, people coming in and seeing a red-winged blackbird for the first time would have no idea. That beautiful conqueree sound that it makes would have been absolutely foreign to their ears. But here in the United States now, you see them in their marshes doing their little things. I also have these over in Liberty State Park. Just an absolutely stunning bird. And then another one of my favorites, Barbara Regina Diesch, another German who really is probably best known for her botanical paintings. But this was a piece that when I finally saw that I could get this piece at auction, I was salivating over. And you can see how it's described here is a bird with wings on a bird with spread wings on a cherry tree branch catching an insect around 1770. So now we got a piece that's 250 years old. And the real question to me when I saw this painting is, what the heck is it? And I had to really kind of scratch my head and look at it. It's on a cherry tree, it's catching an insect. It's clearly to me a flycatcher, but something's wrong. I finally, sorry, my thing is figured out what it was. It's almost certainly a scissor-tail flycatcher, but it's a juvenile scissor-tail flycatcher. And that is not uncommon. A lot of the birds that you're going to see in collections and the paintings are things that were very young when they're shot. And I know this from photographing. It's the young birds that are easier to photograph. Frankly, they're not that experienced. They're not too bright. So I've been over here in Liberty State Park shooting sparrows the last couple of weekends, and almost all of them are juvenile sparrows because they're the ones who will come into a pish and are so curious and will come and check things out. But anyway, I thought it's just, to me, an absolutely stunning and very early painting. All right, now we come to our first American, naturalized American, John Abbott. He actually came to the United States or to North America in around 1773. Came into Jamestown, and the American Revolution was starting, so he decided it might be a little bit better and he could find more bugs. He's really an insect collector in Georgia. So he set sail for Georgia in December of 1775. Well, the war broke out pretty much as soon as he got there, and he ended up serving as a private in the Continental Army. His real love was insects, and he painted insects really magnificently. This was his living. He would paint them and sell them back. And he ended up also painting some birds and tried to paint the birds of Georgia. So this I did acquire from Arader Galleries. And this was, 2 of the 60 original watercolors that were intended to be published in a collection of birds from Georgia. But this was very expensive. And I just don't think he ever got the money to really make this thing come to fruition. And I've seen, several of these watercolors. Interestingly, just looking at them, even compared to what I showed you before, these are very primitive, right? These are very rough sketches. And just to give you an idea, That's the actual bird, a white-throated sparrow. That's what this one is. I'm a big sparrow lover. I just think they're amazing. And then here is our fox sparrow, which is another just stunning bird. They're a little less common here. You know, it's long, it's skinny, it's posed with its head turned, which that pose actually tends to indicate that it was a stuffed bird on a branch, which is pretty much what most of these guys painted. Then comes Alexander Wilson. He's considered really the father of ornithology. He was good friends with George Ord, and he put together really, you know, an amazing folio of birds. But you notice a couple of them. Again, the birds are kind of clumsily posed. They're all clumped together. The first edition, there's three kind of editions of this, maybe a bit more. The first edition was on terrible paper, so most of those have fallen apart. The second edition was on much higher quality paper. I guess he got more money. And the reason he put the birds together is it's expensive, right? So he was clumping these things in just to make them fit as well as possible. Now, those of you with the keen eye, and I know there's a lot of birders in the group, are going to notice that there's some extinct birds in here. So Carolina parakeet, the passenger pigeon, the Labrador duck right here, and then the Eskimo curlew here. I think I'm missing one or two more birds. I know I need to pick up the ivory-billed woodpecker from a set. I do really, you know, enjoy collecting the extinct birds. Now here's another plate. I told you I'm a big sparrow fan. So here you are again with several sparrows, and again, the birders in the group are going to know that that's a loggerhead shrike. And I thought it was really fun to show you my photos in pretty much identical poses of all of these same birds. So on the top left, you have a chipping sparrow. On the top right, you have another white-throated sparrow. In the middle there, you have a savanna sparrow, which you can see. Bottom left, you have the loggerhead shrike, and on the bottom right, you have another fox sparrow. Anyway, I just love that. I love looking at sparrows. We'll come back to that. All right, and then of all of these, honestly, probably my favorite painter, I don't know why I find this, and women painting natural history art back here was relatively rare, but Sarah Stone, born in 1760, later changed her name to Smith, looks like she lived to 84, lived a very long life. So I found one of these at auction on the right called a Cayenne warbler. And Cayenne is, you may or may not know, is the capital of French Guiana, or a port in French Guiana, part of South America. And this bird's territory is really almost all of South America, from Central America down on the eastern coast. And I did not even realize when I purchased this painting that I had actually photographed this bird back in 2017 on one of my medical trips that I turned into a little bit of a birding trip when I went to Brazil. And I just think absolutely stunning. And look at it in that just magnificent frame that Terry, our framer, helped us pick out. It makes me happy every time I look at it, just because it's stunningly beautiful to me, but also just the colors and the freshness and all of that for a painting that's just so amazingly old. And, you know, frankly, it wasn't that expensive. It's just, you know, I'm feeling like I'm giving it new life because we love it so much. Other birds from hers that I've managed to pick up, a horned curassow. This bird is critically rare. So the way this works, she worked for the Laverian Museum. She was only like 21 when she painted that last photo, and she wasn't allowed to be a member of the societies, even though she was painting so unbelievably well. But somebody on an expedition shot this bird, brought it back, and she painted it. Almost certainly the first rendition of this bird ever created from 1789. And look at this, critically endangered in this tiny little sliver of Bolivia. I mean, that to me just really gets my explorer juices flowing to think how just wonderful it must have been to fight the malaria and the heat and the near death to collect this bird and bring it back for her to paint. Just kidding, it's much more comfortable here. And again, she was painting birds from all over the world. Another of my favorites. Just look at the detail on this gorgeous thing. A Senegal parrot. Again, late 18th century, probably around 1790, the same as that other photo. And that we literally just, it's on the wall right here next to me. We just got it back. And then we come to John James Audubon. So he is one of the ones that really got me started. He's really created the greatest folio, and Graham has a full edition of this. He was born in La Cane, Saint-Dominique, which is now Haiti. More than a little controversy surrounding him that, you know, you have to just kind of mention from the outset. His father was a sea captain. He was the bastard child of the father and his chambermaid. He had another daughter who died young from his housekeeper, I think. The father did transport slaves, and Audubon also owned slaves during his time. I don't think that was a major part of his, you know, he basically lost his, you know, money most of the time. It was kind of a terrible businessman, but his superpower was his ability to suffer, his ability to observe. He named at least 25 species of birds, or discovered at least 25 species of birds above and beyond Wilson. He was not really an ornithologist. He was very much self-taught in terms of ornithology and this. George Ord, who loved Wilson, despised Audubon. But his legacy is really, you know, all over. There are many places named Audubon, universities, or high schools named Audubon, streets named Audubon, post offices named Audubon. Now, I have like 45 of these, which I've collected since 2013. I literally would be perfectly happy to have a full double elephant folio of them, and every one in every state. I absolutely love them. So this was the one that was on the advertising piece. So a few things, just I thought it'd be kind of fun to show you the anatomy of an Audubon. Like how do you even know? And this is one of the first things I learned. Well, the size of the paper. These things were on double elephant size folio, the biggest paper size that you could get at the time, archival. And he put it on such big paper because all the birds were going to be life size. So here's mockingbirds, life size. If you're going to do a turkey, life size. Over my shoulder right there is a California condor, life size. That's like biggest flying bird in North America by size. It would have a plate number, it would have a fascicle number. So these things would come from over a period of 12 years, 5 at a time. A big bird, a full size plate like this one, a medium bird, and then a small bird, all on the same paper. The difference was the size of the copper plate that they used to make it. And this fascicle number, interestingly, was supposed to be Roman numerals, but it was Arabic numerals in like the first 100. So there are several states as they kind of got their act together. You'll see binding marks on a lot of them, like this one. You can see little chips because these were bound into books. After you got all 435 plates, you would bind them. There's a plate mark, harder to see on the big ones, but you can actually see it here, and I'll show you a close-up in a second. Some of them have just beautiful, crisp plate mark. Down at the bottom, you'd have the common scientific name, other details of the bird and the plant. It'd usually say drawn from nature by John James Audubon. And he used a very special technique where he would wire the birds up into what he considered naturalistic forms. And this was one of his levers of greatness in terms of his artistic prowess, is by wiring these birds into these poses, he can make them really come alive. And he spent a lot of time really trying to perfect his ability to make these scenes like this. Then at the bottom, it'd usually be engraved and colored by Robert Havell, really Robert Havell Jr. The first 10 copper plates were made by Lazars. His workers went on strike, then Audubon had to scramble and luckily found Havell, who is really a master of doing what's called the aquatint process, which is a very laborious, as I understand it, way of making very detailed copper plates. And these things would be pressed into the copper plate and made, and then hand colored in. So this is just showing you some more details. So here's the same plate. You can see as I've transilluminated it, here's the watermark. I'm guessing that says 1830 something. This is you know, a later plate. And then down here at the bottom, you can see kind of the details, and you can see very beautifully the mark on it. I just absolutely adore this plate. And over my shoulder here, I can show you guys, sitting on my wall, I have not one but two uncolored plates. I just showed you one here. So this is what a plate would look like after they had pressed it and inked it. And then they would have artisans color in using a model like that was colored by Audubon himself, I think, to get the colors right for these things. And remember, these were made over a period of several years. Now, one of the things I love most about Audubon, you know, particularly in his early plates, is his compositions were just extraordinary, and literally some of the best compositions ever, right? This beautiful, sinuous S-shaped curve of the now extinct Carolina parrot. And compare that to what I showed you from Alexander Wilson. Audubon was largely despised by Ord because he said how much better an artist he was, but you know, he was a much better artist. The ivory-billed woodpecker there in the middle, just that beautiful triangular sort of composition. And then to the right, the passenger pigeons. Again, one of my favorite scenes of a bird that is no longer with us, and just, if it could have been otherwise. I already mentioned a lot of controversy around Audubon. We don't know if his mother was Caucasian or African, coming from where he did in Haiti. He claims that, she'd come over on the ship from Europe. So if you take that at face value, there's also controversy in his art. And, I find this very interesting. There's a number of things. So for instance, I showed you that snake climbing trees. George Ord absolutely eviscerated verbally Audubon for saying that rattlesnakes climb trees. Well, guess what? We know that rattlesnakes do in fact climb trees. So that painting is an accurate depiction of something that he saw that has, of course, been embellished. They eviscerated him for painting into one of his paintings of a swan, a lily that said nobody said existed. Well, guess what? The lily was discovered. Right. So there have been a number of other birds that are, quote, mystery birds. One of them was recently rediscovered. It was an aberrant dickcissel. I'm not showing you the picture here. And then this is the bird of Washington that's actually going to go behind my head. I just need to get a big enough ladder to get it up there. And this particular bird was this giant eagle that possibly went extinct during the time of Audubon. I know we're running low on time, but this is a story I'd really like to tell. I may actually do some writing on, because there's been a recent article, if you read the Wikipedia page on Audubon, really kind of just piling on. But the truth is, there's a lot of good reason to believe this bird actually existed, and we will never know unless we find a specimen. But it is entirely possible that he did discover yet another. This would be his 26th bird that he discovered that just happened to go extinct, like so many others during his time. Here to John Selby, he was kind of the Audubon of England, painting really around the same time, just really underappreciated. Now, these are very didactic, not nearly as fun as Audubon, but I have managed to collect a few originals. You see over here on the right, this beautiful sandwich tern pasted down, and there it is in the print that would ultimately have been sold from him. And here we go again. These are two more originals. On the left is a common gull or a mew gull, and on the right is a dovekie, which is this little tiny sea-sized auk, which is just, absolutely stunning. And there they are in real life. So on the left, you've got a mew gull that went actually from California. It's a different subspecies of Larus canis. And then over on the right, a bad picture I took many, many years ago of dovekies in flight up in, I think, Iceland is where we were, north of Iceland, because they haven't actually been seen in Iceland in some time. We were literally up in the Antarctic sea ice to get those, which you see behind them. All right, so John Gould. Now, John Gould really a huge mark on ornithology after Audubon, doing the same sort of thing of creating these wonderful folios. Now, he was an ornithologist. He wasn't a terribly good painter, but he was a painter, and he was really a publisher, editor of these books, starting initially with Century Birds from the Himalayan Mountains, and then the Birds of Europe, and then on until his death. He just really produced some of the most magnificent contributions to ornithology there are. So the Birds of Europe was one of the first ones. Now, it's hard to talk about John Gould without talking about Elizabeth Gould, his wife. So while he wasn't a terribly good artist, she was an excellent artist, and she would take his very rudimentary paintings and she would turn them into the masterpieces that end up. And she, of course, got better over time, doing hundreds, if not thousands, of these pieces. I'm not sure, I stole this off of Wikipedia for fair use in this presentation. I'm not quite sure where this painting came from, but if anybody out there knows, please email me. I'd love to get a better image of it because I think it's wonderful. And the bird is in the crowd. What is she holding? She's holding a red-footed falcon. And it just so happens another piece on the right that I got from Graham was the lithographic proof that was made to make the final print on the right. And what you see is that they circled the juvenile. I thought the composition was fine. And you can see take out. We don't know if that's in John Gould's hand or Elizabeth Gould's hand or somebody else's hand, but just you know, that to me is just living really with these things and seeing just a huge piece of how these were made. And this is a very different process from the copper plate aquatint engravings that were used to make the Birds of America, to make Audubon's folio. This was less expensive, a little easier to do, but still made some just absolutely wonderful plates. A little known fact is that when Charles Darwin collected all of the finches on the Galapagos Islands, it ultimately led, and these are all my photographs, to contribute heavily to his origin of species. It was actually John Gould who identified them. He thought they were a bunch of boring blackbirds. And he had to get, and typical of the time is that Darwin didn't actually say where he got them from. He just had a bunch of skins with no labels on them. So he had to kind of go back and get information from other captains who were out there to figure out exactly where these things came from, and determined that they were in fact finches and all very similarly related, but it adapted and it erupted in this environment into all of these niches. So just wonderful if you haven't been to the Galapagos Islands. All right, the birds of Australia. So this was between 1840 and 1848. He discovered, I'm going to have to look at my notes here. I think there are 600 plates in this. Right. 328 of the species he described were new to science. Let me say that again. 328. This guy basically literally wrote the book on the birds of Australia. He's considered the father of bird study in Australia, and the Gold League there is named after him. My wife and I have been there a couple of times. We love it. It's just such a magnificent place. And you know, this plate we also got from Graham. And again, because we had a very wonderful experience with these king parrots. You can see the male on the left and the female on the right, and Gould's print in the middle. The Birds of Great Britain, 1862 to 1873. This really was a departure, and you see the evolution of these books from being very didactic to finally these, I'll show you, have these young and eggs and are really showing more of the life history of the birds. And they're absolutely wonderful. And Gould did not do all the paintings himself for these things. He had several painters, including, you know, H.C. Richter, Edward Lear, Joseph Wolfe, William Hart. All of these great ornithologic painters were really doing most of the paintings. He was doing a lot of the writing and rudimentary things. Henry Constantine Richter really came after Gould's wife died, right after or during this this expedition to Australia. And so he lost really his top painter. And Richter kind of stepped in to fill the void, and you start seeing him on all of these later paintings. And I really, you know, liken him to, what was I going to say? I had kind of a thing for it. It's almost like Martin Johnson Heade was not appreciated during his time. I'm not going to say he's going to be Martin Johnson Heade, but he's a painter who's like throwaway paintings that are now worth millions of dollars. We're not going there. But I think he was really just a tremendous painter. And these are two of the ones that I have. Again, this I got from Graham. These are little terns. We have here least terns, which are very similar, very closely related. And you see, you know, this beautiful beach scene with these little chicks and the adult flying and everything in the background. You know, it's really kind of another step in showing a whole nother level of the life cycle of these birds. And then over here, because of the lithographic plate, you see it sort of mirror image, which is what gets turned into the final plate that would be in the book. And just because I happen to have it, there is a nice flying picture of a least tern. Now I have pictures of this. This is a great crested grebe. Unfortunately, they're in film, so I couldn't scan them for this presentation, but just look at these adorable little chicks riding the back. I mean, it's an absolutely stunning, happy, magnificent scene that also gives you a tremendous amount of information about the bird, all of which I think is fairly accurate. And then finally for Gould, he did a monograph on the hummingbirds. He was absolutely obsessed with hummingbirds. I think for the time had the biggest collection of hummingbirds. And these things are stunning if you've never seen them. They've got all of these metallic paints and gum arabic on them, and they absolutely iridesce. These kind of things are hanging in our bathroom downstairs where the light's good. And you just walk by them and you start getting these glints off of the gorgeous of these amazing birds. So if you haven't seen these in person, I really recommend that you find them. They're not super, super rare. And as far as natural history goes, they're not even super, super expensive. I'm sure Graham will be happy to sell you one of them. All right, we're going to skip forward now 100 years. I do not have a lot of painters in that period, but I think, sort of as we come to the end of this journey through the natural history of bird art, we got to talk about Roy Torgy Peterson. A quote from Paul Ehrlich in the Birder's Handbook: "In this century, no one has done more to promote an interest in living creatures than Roy Torgy Peterson, the inventor of the modern field guide." And he did, right? He, a 39 by 27 inch double elephant folio was not exactly conducive to identifying birds in the field. He shrunk it down. He was able to point out the key elements of the bird that would help differentiate them from each other. It had very succinct but accurate text that has also evolved over time. And I was lucky enough to get 2 of the original plates. The one on the left here of Loons, this is out of one of his earliest guides. What you're seeing here is the eastern cormorants, and you can't really see it here, but if you lift that up, underneath it is the western cormorants. The Loons stay the same. And it shows you the labels as they ended up appearing in the book. So this is a piece of cellophane that's laying over it. Terry, our amazing framer, actually built a cabinet. So if I want to show it to people, I can open it up and lift those up so you can actually see the artwork under it. I mean, just the way this was produced to me is just so exciting. And this one, the plate is kind of on the back. This is actually literally currently out being reframed. We just had a little more work to be done to it. And again, showing you all of these beautiful eiders. Eiders, for those of you who don't know, are a type of sea duck. We get very commonly the common eider here on the eastern seaboard. Rarely we will get that king eider, and these other guys who really are pretty rare south of like Alaska. Just kind of going and cutting those off just to show you. Here they are. This is an immature male, right? Here's the full adult male, and here's a beautiful, probably young female right here. All right, so finally, when I first started getting into birding, and I had my little Peterson's field guide, which I got grummed up because I was carrying into the field with dirty hands all the time, the very first step up was a book on the sparrows of North America by Jim Rising, who sadly has since left us, who's an amazing sparrow expert at the University of Ontario, and David Beadle. And David, I've talked to him on the phone a couple times. I've emailed him, actually emailed him to get this picture on his birthday. So, he's the only one of my artists who's still alive in this. But this book had an impact on me. And because I was actually contributing photos to the next book that they did and having conversations, I found out I could actually buy the plates. So I actually bought 2 of the plates from this original book, which are some of my prized possessions. They're literally right there on my wall. Hold on, I can show you. There you go. And there, yeah, there. Very hard to aim this thing in reverse. All right. So I've been, looking at these things for years and years. And I remember reading, as I try to readjust here, hopefully I didn't make you guys too dizzy. When I was reading the foreword to this book, this quote, out of the foreword, I, meaning Jim Rising, had to test my ability to identify these birds correctly. And he, David, had to test his ability to paint them, not paint them, but paint them in a way that they could be identified by somebody who knew the birds. And he wasn't just talking about identifying a sparrow as a savanna sparrow. He was talking about identifying the subspecies. And that to me totally hit all my nerd bells. Like the idea that I could see birds literally in evolution, right? So you're looking at a group of sparrows, and the sparrow here is a little different because of random variations or selective pressure or both. And the bird over here is very different. And looking and trying to understand what it is that makes these is a whole huge departure from everybody else who'd gone before. And this was really becoming a new thing, and it just appealed to me on all levels. So I've been photographing birds, and I really love to try to identify them to subspecies, and I'll sit here and read through banding guides and look online and study photos that aren't labeled to see if I can actually determine what these birds are. On the left, you have snow buntings and McKay's buntings. But on the right, you have all of these savanna sparrows. And looky there. So I thought really just with the conclusion, I would share with you where art, you can call this illustration, but to me it's art, has gone. I didn't get the Rostratus, the large-billed savanna sparrow on here. I do have photos of it, but again, they're in film. But kind of our typical mediogrissus, these are all Passerculus sandwichessus. This is, I saw these again in Liberty State Park. It was a huge fallout of sparrows this week. I go out west where I grew up and you get these much paler Navidensis, and then you get these very dark colored Labradorius sparrows that are, you know, I'll see both of these in the field. You see darker yellow up here, darker on the back, and then the California salt march belding sparrow, again, darker. This is another California subspecies. And then my favorite is the Ipswich sparrow, which breeds on Cape Sable Island, this little tiny island off of Nova Scotia. And we will get right along just in kind of the sand dunes and sometimes in the snow here. And you just see it's big and pale and wonderful. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to thank all of you for indulging me in my pathology for the last few minutes. I'm going to take liberty and encourage all of you who haven't done so to vote. It has never been more important than it is right now. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to see if we have any questions. And I want to point out that I finished at 7:18, so I left you 12 minutes for questions.
I am very proud of you, Michael.
I had to cut a few corners. I had notes. You don't know, I've got 5 pages of notes here, front and back, so.
Well, I'm sure that everybody is joining me for a muted and silenced applause. And just want to say for all of us, thank you so much, Dr. Stubblefield. That was fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much. So quickly, we'd like to move on to some questions and answers. If you haven't left a question in the Q&A box and you have one, please do so. You still have time. And we are going to also, Dr. Stubblefield has graciously agreed to answer any questions that we don't get to tonight after the fact, and we will be sure to send all of those out after the event to all of the attendees. So if we don't get to your question tonight, no worries. And we have some really great ones in the chat, so thank you all. I will go ahead and start with a question, Dr. Stubblefield, from Caroline Mixon, who asks, in the time of Audubon et al., was making a living off of their art necessary, or was it a wealthy guy's hobby? And how did they market themselves? Did they have an agent? Or did the printing house do the marketing?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to all of it, but that's really very, so Audubon was a crappy businessman, right? He had this Mill Grove farm outside of Pennsylvania, and he had no interest, according to the things, in really running it. He just wanted to roam the woods and shoot birds and paint them. And that's all. It's a story of obsession, right? And he married his neighbor Bakewell, and Lucy Bakewell, and she supported him. I got somebody like that. And it was really, they kind of traveled to Kentucky and to New Orleans and all these other places, and he had a number of businesses that failed. Largely, some of them just the economy sucked, and sometimes it was because he just wasn't very good as a businessman. So he had his folio together, all of his paintings. He went to Philadelphia, which is where you go, which was where Alexander Wilson had his stuff engraved. And because of George Ord and Alexander Wilson and him being a bit braggy and saying how much better an artist he was just completely shunned. He was mortified. So he packed up, basically took out everything, left poor Lucy, I think, teaching piano lessons or something, and he went to Europe. And it was a whole different story. In Europe, he first, kind of London and then up to Edinburgh, he was treated as like this American frontiersman celebrity. But he played that up. You see that famous painting of him in the wolfskin outfit, right? All of that was him trying to gin up so that people would pay money. So he had to get the money up front. They would pay, I think it was $800 or $1,000. It'd be like $80,000 today. It costs the equivalent of several $million in today's money to produce the birds of America. So he had to get all of these donors to come in and do it. So he was playing the part, doing parties, showing the photos, and getting people to pay. Now, a lot of people died and didn't finish paying, or, you know, this is the early 1800s, right? So he really had to work it to make this thing come to fruition. And it wasn't exactly this huge economic success. It was just enough to make it happen. I don't think he came out of there a wealthy man. What he did do is he came out and then he did the second edition, which was the octavos, which was shrunk down. And that was much more of an economic success. And then, so once he got his kind of act together, but boy, that first Birds of America, not so much. Now, I don't know as much about Gould and how he went about it, but I have a feeling he was much more of an economic success in producing these things. But I hope that answers the question. It's a great question.
All right, Michael, another question we have is, what was the first painting or print you saw that created your interest in bird art?
It was a girlfriend, sorry. Who knows? So I happened to be dating a much older woman at one point in my life who is an artist, and she gave me for Christmas an Audubon octavo, first edition of a Bonaparte skull, which is this random gull none of you probably ever seen except for the birders, that we just had in abundance in a certain place we like to go here. And it was just a sweet, wonderful gift. And again, I didn't know you could own these things. I didn't know mortals, I thought these only existed in museums. I didn't know you can, you know, pretty reliably get these things for $100, right? They really make very nice stocking stuffers at this point in time. So that was kind of the first piece of natural history art. And then it's been just a pathologic, you know, thing since then. It's the curse of not having kids and having a wife who doesn't say no very often to me getting stuff. She just looks at me with kind of a scolding manner.
Sorry, Ellen.
I know, she's over there laughing.
We have so many great questions in this Q&A box, so I know that we'll have to come back to a lot of them after the fact, and I'm very excited about that. It seems like we have a lot of birders in the group, so we have
we packed it as much as we could. We have a whole
We have a question from Peter Gordon, who says, are you familiar with the work of Richard Parkes, probably Georgia's best ornithological artist?
I am not, but I should be. I'm gonna have to write that down.
So we'll have to write that down.
Yeah.
And now we'll all go learn something new.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. You know, I have to say, I don't know everybody. Again, I'm not an art historian. I look at auctions and I keep track of the people whose stuff I like and, you know, kind of see when it comes around. But yeah,
Sure.
I do not claim to know everybody. That's great. That's good for you guys to know too. You want to support the local guys and gals.
That's exactly right. Thank you for that question.
All right, let's see. This is not about birding, but do you have any other favorite modern artists that you really like?
Are you kidding?
We know you love Forstmann, so that's how we met.
We love Eric Forstmann. Janet Fish, we have like 8 Janet Fish paintings. That's my wife's favorite. I think Max Ferguson is listening on the thing. He's probably one of the best hyper-realistic artists ever. We have a painting of his that just we absolutely adore. We have a bedroom back here because of COVID. I haven't rented a storage locker, which I need to. That's literally just packed with Audubons and other art. And we have a 7.5 foot tall Robert Cottingham painting of a camera that we absolutely love. God, there's just so much. We must have 100 contemporary artists, or you know, somewhere between 50 and 100. It's just, I'll send a list. Robert Jackson. My God, who else? Oh, Eric Wirt. If you guys haven't looked for Eric Wirt, his paintings, he just had an exhibit now at Gallery Hennick. Unbelievable, hyper-realistic botanical paintings. Largely, they're just stunning. It's the, you know, you guys have your Redites. This is Redite on steroids with a modern twist. Smoking crack. It's just amazing.
Well, you've sold me.
Right, you got to go look for Eric Wirt, but you have to see them in person. They just, looking at them online does not do justice. Bring a magnifying glass. Yeah.
Well, I think looking at our time, we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So this will be our last question. I think it is a good question to end us on because it involves sort of both of the elements you discussed tonight. So your photography, as well as some of these historical prints. So Carl Bendorf asks, as a birder, we often debate the use of paintings versus photographs in our field guides. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons? And will both the art and the photographs and field guides to continue to evolve?
Yeah, so first of all, hi, Carl. He and I spent some wonderful, amazing days in Colorado together. If anybody's going to go birding, I highly recommend him. And I got my mountain chicken, the white-tailed ptarmigan, which is another Audubon I have, which is wonderful. But to answer the question, I think you need both, right? I think the didactic nature of the drawings, like Peterson did, and now I keep wanting to say Selby because that's stuck in my head, but there's another field guide artist. Everybody's gonna, hold on, wait, there's an app for that. There we go, Sibley. I couldn't think of it, I don't know why. Those are very wonderful because you can kind of distill the features that are most likely to remain constant and kind of point them out. Right, and those of us who are in the field a lot know there's a tremendous amount of variation. Again, because of my pathology, I've been paying a lot of attention to song sparrows, one of the most common sparrows that we have here. And I will photograph every song sparrow that will let me take a picture of it, really just so I can kind of get a collection of the variation across seasons in song sparrows, because I'm kind of wanting to see if I can really identify the Atlanticus and the Melodia subspecies. That's nerd talk for anybody who doesn't care, but there's differences, and I just want to know if I can do it reliably or make an argument that I can do it reliably, right? So I think there's work for both. And then what's happened is now eBird, which is this amazing thing. Oh, that's one of the things I didn't tell you. I'm sorry. I thought this was very important. It gets back to the things from my notes here that I didn't get to. Hold on. So I showed you David Beadle, and I don't know if David, I invited him a couple times to join. I hope if he got here. So David Beadle, in addition to being an unbelievable bird artist and illustrator, is also number 17 in the world on eBirds. He has seen 6,905 species. And that to me is just epic. I, on the other hand, have seen 1,626 species and am number 2,358 on the list. But I'm working on it. There's room to improve, and I'm not quite dead yet. So anyway, that eBird, if you guys have ever gone on it, is a way of keeping your kind of life list, but you can also, people will post photos there. So it's a way, if you want to see 10,000 photos of song sparrows from all over the world, go to eBird and just type in song sparrow and start scrolling through. So they're both critically important because there is so much variability. And I would say for people who are starting to bird, use both. Like, why on earth would you limit yourself to one or the other? They both have a tremendous amount of utility. I hope that answers your question, Carl, but thanks for asking one.
That's terrific. Thank you. And remember that we will be sending out a report for any questions that didn't get answered. Thank you so much for submitting all of these wonderful questions that we just couldn't get to all of them tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
And
All right.
I think it's my time to say thank you. If we were together in person, I would be hopefully handing you some token and thanking you. I think you get the sense that this is not only a person with extreme levels of expertise, but passion that is incredible. And he and Ellen together, having been able to visit their home / museum / gallery, you could spend the whole day really learning from and of course spending wonderful time with two wonderful people. I just can't wait for the fall and an exhibition and be able to see you all and you both in person. And I really want to thank everyone for coming. Every new friend to Brenau, please know that again, this is now one of your other homes, and we hope that you will share, you will come and you will share in some of these kinds of activities that we have. And I think you probably end up on a mailing list now, so you'll find out when these things are, so you can come see them. I really do hope to see you at a future event, and I wish you safe, safety and good voting, and a safe holidays and health and good health to all. So again, Michael, thank you. Fantastic way to spend an hour, and I feel edified and I feel impassioned. So thank you.
My pleasure. So I click the leave button now.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.